Welcome to this deep dive, tailored for you, the learner. Today we're looking into something really fundamental, how our fears and our logic get tangled up.
Yes, it's a fascinating area.
We've got some interesting angles on this, and the goal today is, well, to try and unpack why our most rational theming thoughts sometimes feel like they're actually being steered, maybe, by our fears.
Exactly. And my perspective, coming from Gestalt psychology and philosophy, really focuses on how we perceive things, how we naturally organize our experience. What stands out, what fades back.
Patterns of attention, right?
Patterns of attention, figure ground relationships. They're key to understanding how fear might operate beneath the surface of logic.
Okay, let's maybe start with a picture. Imagine like you're standing right at the edge of a dark forest, sun's going down.
Okay.
You might feel this, I don't know, this unease, even if there's nothing obviously scary there. That feeling, the thinking goes, is kind of key. Fear isn't always a lion jumping out.
No, definitely not. That forest image is perfect, actually. It highlights how fear often works more subtly, more like the atmosphere, the background feeling, than a specific identifiable threat. It's the ground, not the figure.
Right. So let's dive into that core idea. Fear disguising itself as logic. It's not shouting, it's whispering, sort of nudging our reasoning.
Precisely. That figure ground idea is helpful here. Think of those classic optical illusions like the vase and the two faces.
Yeah, I know the one.
Your brain focuses on one, that's the figure. The other becomes the ground, the background. Fear often is the ground. It's this underlying tension, this coloring to our thoughts, but it's not what we think we're focused on.
Ah, I see. Because logic feels so much clearer, doesn't it? It seems straightforward, structured, like a safe place to land when things feel murky.
Exactly. Logic offers that comfort of clarity. But here's the twist. That underlying fear, that ground, can actually direct which logic we latch onto.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, think about someone hesitating to apply for a dream job. They might list very logical sounding reasons. Oh, I'm probably underqualified, or the competition's just too fierce, maybe it's not the right time.
Yeah, sounds familiar. Very sensible, practical thoughts.
On the surface, yes. But if you probe a little, often those logical reasons are masking deeper fears. Fear of rejection, maybe, fear of inadequacy, fear of the unknown, even.
So the logic becomes a kind of acceptable explanation for avoiding something scary.
Precisely. And this connects to a Gestalt idea called the unfinished Gestalt. Fear creates this sense of incompleteness, this tension. Our minds instinctively want to resolve that, to find closure.
So we try to finish the picture.
We do. And framing that vague fear as a concrete, logical problem, like being underqualified, is one way we try to create that closure. It makes the intangible fear feel, well, tangible, manageable.
But it's not really managing the fear, is it? It's managing the explanation.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yes, it brings the background discomfort into the foreground as a seemingly solvable logical puzzle. But the resolution it offers can be, well, misleading.
Which leads us to this idea that rational thought can be, deceptive sometimes. Like a magic trick, you said. Focusing us on the reasonable explanation while the real driver fear is hidden.
Exactly, misdirection. Think about someone who avoids flying. They know the statistics rationally about safety.
Right, it's safer than driving, technically.
Yes, but they might focus intensely on logical points like, well, planes can malfunction, or turbulence feels really dangerous, or you have absolutely no control.
And those things aren't untrue, exactly.
No, they're not untrue, but the emphasis on them, the weight they're given, often masks deeper fears. Maybe claustrophobia, maybe a fear of heights, perhaps even something more existential, like a fear of confronting mortality.
And then we start looking for proof that our logic is right, don't we? Confirmation bias.
Exactly that. Once we land on a logical justification that aligns with our fear, we tend to seek out evidence that supports it, news of rare accidents, stories about turbulence, and we filter out the vast evidence of routine safety.
We build a case, basically. A logical case to protect the underlying fear.
We do. And again, from the Gestalt view, this ties back to that drive for closure. Fear creates ambiguity, an open loop. Logic steps in, offers a way to close that loop, to make sense of it. But sometimes that closure comes at the cost of emotional honesty.
So, by prioritizing finding a logical reason, we might actually be avoiding the real issue. smoothing things over emotionally instead of dealing with them.
That's often what happens, and doing that consistently can create this internal conflict, this low-level hum of anxiety or dissatisfaction, because the root cause isn't being addressed.
It makes me think, big life decisions, like should we move to a new city?
Ah, yes. Classic scenario.
You can have a really strong logical arguments on both sides, can't you?
Sure.
Saying means family nearby, stability. Moving means growth, new opportunities, all perfectly logical.
Completely. Each side can build a very compelling rational case, but often the real energy behind each position comes from unspoken emotions.
Like the person wanting to stay might actually be terrified of losing their support system.
Or the person pushing to move might be driven by a deep fear of stagnation, of getting stuck.
And if they just argue the logic points back and forth,
They can go in circles forever because they're not talking about the real stakes, the emotional core. The breakthrough often happens when someone finally asks, okay, but what am I really afraid of here?
that shift inward.
Yes, turning from the external justifications to the internal landscape. That's when vulnerability can emerge and the real conversation starts.
It's like the logic was a barrier in a way.
It can be. And this really highlights a core Gestalt insight. Awareness precedes change. Logic alone can't set us free if we're unconsciously using it to hide from ourselves.
So let's go back to that dark forest image again. Instead of logically arguing why the shadows aren't dangerous, what happens if we just acknowledge the fear? Stand there with it.
Well, often when we allow ourselves to fully experience the feeling without immediately trying to explain it away, its power starts to shift.
House.
The undefined shapes, the shadows, they might start to become just trees. The chill isn't necessarily danger, it's just cold air. By engaging directly with the feeling, we can sometimes dismantle the fearful interpretations our logic has layered on top.
So we see the actual forest, not just the scary story our mind is telling about it.
Exactly, a shift from conceptual fear to direct experience. And in that shift, logic can become a real tool, again, helping us figure out the actual path, not just react to imagined threats.
So it's about how we use logic. Is it a shield or is it a lamp?
Beautifully put, yes. And to grasp this better, we need to think about how our minds organize experience moment to moment. This idea of the field.
Okay, the field of awareness.
Yeah.
Everything we're experiencing right now.
Yes, the totality. And within that field, some things pop out as the figure, our focus, while others form the ground. As we said, fear often resides in the ground. It's that background hum, that tension.
And because it's in the background, it subtly shapes what we do focus on, like those logical justifications.
Precisely. Think about someone staying in, say, a toxic relationship.
Right. They might be intensely focused on the figure of logical reasons. We have so much history, it's too complicated to leave, I'd be lonely. All the practical stuff. Yes. Well, the pervasive unhappiness, the constant unease, the emotional ground gets pushed aside, unacknowledged.
And there's this idea, isn't there, that our inner state kind of mirrors how we see the outer world.
Yes, isomorphism is the technical term. But basically, the internal disharmony caused by fear can distort our perception. We start seeing the world in a way that confirms our need to avoid the fear. Clinging to logical reasons to stay in that relationship creates a kind of coherence, but it's built on avoiding the emotional truth.
So our deep need for things to make sense, for closure, actually fuels this reliance on logic, even if the logic is just a cover story.
Absolutely. That drive for closure, completing the pattern, is fundamental. Fear breaks the pattern, introduces uncertainty. Logic rushes in to fill the gaps, to weave a narrative that feels complete.
Like the person avoiding art because they tell themselves, I just don't have any talent. That's a neat, closed explanation. It is. It provides closure. No talent, therefore no point trying. But it neatly avoids confronting the potential underlying fear. Maybe fear of judgment, fear of not being perfect, fear of vulnerability.
So it's a superficial closure. It doesn't resolve the real unfinished business.
Exactly. And this brings us to the crucial role of attention. Attention is how we select what becomes the figure. When fear is dominating the ground, our attention naturally gravitates towards logical explanations that help us manage or avoid the fear. We develop a kind of tunnel vision.
We miss the bigger picture.
We can, yes. We focus narrowly on the logic that confirms our avoidance, and we become less aware of the emotional reality or other possibilities.
Okay, so how do we break out of that? How do we shift from being kind of run by this fear-logic combo to something more authentic?
Often the key is what we call insight, that aha moment.
Yeah.
It's a sudden shift in perception where things just rearrange themselves and you see the whole pattern differently. Insight lets you see beyond the usual figure ground setup.
Can we use the art example again? How might insight work there?
Sure, the person stuck in "I have no talent" might suddenly ask, maybe in a quiet moment, wait, why am I so resistant to even just doodling?
Hmm.
That question shifts the focus. It moves away from the logical barrier, no talent, towards the underlying feeling, the resistance itself. And that might lead to recognizing, oh, it's not about talent. I'm actually scared of looking foolish.
Yeah.
Or I'm afraid of what might come out if I really let go.
So the insight reveals the fear hidden behind the logical excuse.
Exactly. That shift, that reorganization of how you see the situation, we call that restructuring. By shifting attention from the logical story to the emotional reality, new choices become possible.
And this connects to using attention more deliberately, like mindful attention.
Precisely. Mindful attention isn't about forcing anything. It's about widening the lens, deliberately trying to notice both the figure and the ground, observing the interplay without immediately jumping to conclusions or judgments, noticing the subtle feelings, the bodily sensations.
So with public speaking anxiety, instead of just reciting the logical reasons to avoid it, my slides aren't perfect, someone else could do it better.
You'd also notice, intentionally, okay, my heart is pounding, my palms are sweaty. Where is this feeling coming from?
Paying attention to the physical experience of the fear.
Yes. And by doing that, you create space for the deeper roots to surface, maybe memories of being criticized, maybe core beliefs about not being good enough. The fear comes into the foreground, not as something to be instantly shut down by logic, but as information.
It sounds like moving from being automatically driven to being consciously aware.
That's a good way to think about it. And this opens up a really interesting possibility. Maybe fear and logic don't have to be enemies.
Oh, how so? They seem so opposed.
Well, what if we saw fear as, well, energy, a signal that something needs attention? And logic, then, could be the tool we use to understand that signal and channel that energy constructively.
Okay, like back in the dark forest, the unease is the signal, pay attention.
Right, and logic helps you assess, okay, what are the actual risks? What's the best path forward?
So confronting the fear clarifies things,
Hmm.
and then logic helps navigate the reality.
Exactly. Fear illuminates what needs looking at. Logic helps us look effectively.
But logic can still trick us, right? That feeling of control it gives us.
Oh, absolutely. Logic offers this wonderful illusion of mastery over the messy, unpredictable world. But that illusion can become a cage. If we rely only on logic, we can become rigid, closed off to experiences that don't fit our neat, rational frameworks.
Like that cliff edge thought experiment you mentioned.
Yes. Logically, you can calculate you're perfectly safe standing, say, 5 feet from the edge. Your rational mind says no danger.
But it doesn't feel safe, does it?
Exactly. There's the raw, immediate experience, the wind, the vastness, the visceral sense of the drop. That's a different kind of knowing, one that pure logic doesn't fully capture. There's this constant tension between logic's push for stability and the inherent fluidity of just being in the world. Cling too tightly to logic and you can kind of freeze your awareness.
And even when we get those moments of insight we talked about, they're not always comfortable, are they? Sometimes seeing things clearly is unsettling.
Very true. Insight fundamentally rearranges your perceptual world. That can be disorienting. Remember the person in the difficult relationship.
Yeah.
Gaining the insight, wow, I'm staying because I'm terrified of being vulnerable, might be liberating eventually, but initially, it can actually intensify the fear. It forces them to confront really big, scary questions about who they are, what they need, how they want to live.
It's like opening a door and realizing the room is much bigger and more complicated than you thought.
Precisely. It expands understanding, but it also reveals the limits of what we can understand. A bit like looking up at the night sky, awe-inspiring, but also humbling in its vastness.
So, taking a step back, this whole dynamic really shapes our basic sense of reality, doesn't it?
Absolutely. From a Gestalt viewpoint, reality isn't some fixed, out-there thing. It's a dynamic field, constantly co-created by our perception, our emotions, our interpretations. Fear, and how we manage it with logic, are huge players in that creation process.
And our sense of self, our identity, that's also part of this field, a construction.
Very much so.
All right.
The self is also a gestalt, a pattern we perceive, built from our experiences, our stories, our choices. And those stories, if they're heavily shaped by fear-avoiding logic, can become very limiting narratives. I'm the kind of person who isn't good at X, I could never do Y.
Trapped by your own logical explanations.
In a way, yes. Embracing the fluidity, being willing to question those narratives, allowing for restructuring, that's where real growth and maybe reinvention happens.
It really feels like this is an ongoing journey then, not something you just figure out once.
Oh, definitely. Think of the dark forest one last time. What if, instead of just trying to get through it safely using logic or being paralyzed by fear, we saw it as territory, inner territory to be explored?
With fear as a strange kind of guide.
Perhaps, pointing towards the areas that hold energy, the places that need attention. And as you immerse yourself in that exploration, the sharp lines between figure and ground, between emotion and logic, start to blur. Logic becomes less of a shield, more like a lantern, helping you see the next step on an unfolding path.
So, the learner, as you reflect on this deep dive, this whole interplay of fear and logic, what's standing out for you right now? Are there any assumptions, any logical reasons in your own life that might be worth, well, gently questioning?
Yes, and maybe consider those moments when your logic feels particularly strong, particularly charged somehow, defensible. Could that charge, that energy, be the subtle hum of a fear hiding in the background?
We hope this exploration has maybe offered a fresh lens on why we think and feel the way we do. It's really a reminder, isn't it, that paying attention to the ground of our emotions can bring surprising clarity to the figure of our logic.
Okay.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We really encourage you to keep exploring these ideas.